everyone, welcome back to my channel and our Simple Abundance year. We are following through Sarah Bon Bronick's book Simple Abundance this year, talking about all of her principles, so thanks for joining me. If you have not watched the last video about job, career, or calling, I would point you to that video first before today's video, because this topic really is a nice jumping off point once you've watched that other video. So we were talking about, in that video, about the calling and working from the heart and feeling like what you're doing for your work life is speaking from a place of authenticity. So have you guys given that some thought? I've been thinking about it. So in the entry that we're going to talk about today, it's called The Courage to Answer the Call, right? And I'm actually going to tie in the following one called Setting Your Own Pace, and then I've borrowed from Sarah's older version of Simple Abundance, the Daybook of Comfort and Joy, for another entry that is no longer in the new book, but it ties in really well with this one. So, the courage to answer the call. I kind of alluded to this in the last video about how it can be challenging. And Sarah even said, once we get to a certain point in our lives, we don't have as much freedom. We might have obligations, we might have mortgages and things like that that would prevent us from making the choices that come from inside. But if you have this calling to do something, and then you don't follow it, she did tell us that there would be consequences. What do you think those consequences would be? I've been thinking about that. I'm sure that it's, well, we talked about soul sucking, but it's like, I'm sure that it would be things like depression, it would be resentment, it would be just really feeling dissatisfied with life. Yeah. I'm sure that it could also mean physical ailments as well. Probably just feeling generally unwell, right? So let me see what Sarah says about the courage to answer the call. Do you think you have the courage? Make no mistake, when you start on the path to authenticity, love will change you, transforming your life in countless ways. Your family and friends might not notice the changes in the beginning because they're so small, but you will, and you'll know that miracles are taking place. Love will sustain you when passion's path takes unexpected twists and turns. Love will dissolve your fears by creating opportunities you couldn't have imagined before you began the search to discover and rediscover your authentic self. And when in doubt, despair and denial threaten to dismantle your dreams, love will rear up in your defense. The next time you feel frightened and fragile, stand very still. If you do, you might feel the tip of an angel's wing brush against your shoulder. That's beautiful, isn't it? No coward soul is yours, Sarah says. I know this, even if today you don't. I know this because you wouldn't have come this far in the Simple Abundance journey if you were a coward. Reluctantly, I have come to the realization that feeling afraid is Spirit's signal to ask for grace and power. So take a deep breath, seek your quiet center, and push on. One of the hardest lessons we ever must master is accepting that experiencing fear is out of our hands. But how we deal with that fear is not. The closer we get to giving our dream to the world, the fiercer the struggle becomes to bring it forth. Why should this be so? Because we will be inexorably changed, and life can never return to the way it once was. Of course, we're scared. We wouldn't be sane if we weren't. But how many exquisite, glorious dreams sent to heal the world has heaven mourned because the dreamer, weary and discouraged, relied only on her strength and could do no more? Today, if you feel afraid, take comfort in remembering once more that courage is fear that has said her prayers. I like that. Trust that the same power that gifted you with your dreams knows how to help you make it come true. This ties into a lot of what we've talked about as far as in a creative pursuit, giving that last percentage up to spirit to help you with all the details, right? And I think I love that, what she said about courage. Take comfort in remembering once more that courage is fear that has said her prayers. So it's like you still have the fear, but you've said your prayers, so maybe you know that your fears are unfounded at that point because you've given them over to spirit. What do you think about that? So I think she's exploring really in this one about how you can have fear about answering this call, but that you can have courage instead of fear, right? But it's okay, you're gonna probably still have fear, and everybody is gonna have fear. I like how she said that we wouldn't have even made it this far on the journey if we hadn't been courageous. It has been an interesting journey all year, right? We've tackled a lot of things. I know I've thought about so many things that we've talked about. So in the entry, setting your own pace, this is getting ready to, or this is about how it may take you a lifetime to actually fulfill this calling. So she says that it's a marathon, not a sprint to get there. And especially with setting your own pace, she's talking as a mother and a wife about how she struggled to find the balance to actually get her writing in and not feel like anything was suffering. Like she still had duties at home and everything. So if you have a lot of duties at home and you're balancing a lot of things in your life, especially because you're probably still working your job while you may be getting something off the ground, it can be a lot and it can take a long time. So it's okay to set your own pace and do a little bit at a time. One thing she said, this one, she wrote ouch after it, and I agree. So she said that she was picking up her child at school one day, and somebody actually said to her, have you found work yet, or are you still just writing? Isn't that awful? And the thing is, she always wanted to be a writer. So I didn't discuss this entry, but she had a couple of days ago an entry about keeping a journal and how she was reading back on some of her journals. And she had gone so far back into the 70s when she had proclaimed that she was going to be a writer. But in terms of this setting your own pace, it took her, in her mind anyway, a really long time to actually become a writer, because in her mind, becoming a writer meant that her work was acknowledged or published, I suppose. So she didn't feel like she could just declare that I'm a writer, even though we had that entry about how she was like, I'm a writer in Paris, when she was staying at the Shakespeare and Company place. But that stinks if somebody says like, oh, did you find a job, or are you still painting? It's just like, we talked about when you might have something that you don't want to share with the world because they might not be supportive, or they're so used to people doing the quote-unquote normal thing and get a job and buy a house, whatever the things are that you're supposed to do in your life. And maybe you've been a little bit rogue. I've definitely been rogue. I shared with you guys that in another video that, my family especially they just are not even surprised anymore. They don't really expect me to have a normal situation, if you want to call it quote-unquote normal anyway. I think there's a lot of people that do all different things. I know that right now, and I shared this with you guys last time, I'm struggling to figure out, what do I want to do? I'm doing some things, but this entry from the old book is called Getting From Here to There When You Haven't a Clue What to Do. And she talks about the author who wrote the book Wishcraft, W-I-S-H-C-R-A-F-T. I feel like I've mentioned that before, and if I haven't, I know it's written in my journal because Sarah mentions books throughout Simple Abundance, and I know it's on my list of books that I would like to read, and it's really about finding your passion. And so the author of Wishcraft is Barbara Sher, S-H-E-R. And so Barbara started working with people who just felt like they had no clue what they wanted to do. And I didn't mention this in another video when we were talking about this, but there are a lot of books out there. Like What Color Is Your Parachute is a good book for if you're trying to really hone in on what you may want to do for a career. But so Sarah talks about how Barbara worked with some people to help them figure out what they wanted to do. But what she found out was that they already knew what they wanted to do. The main problem, and I'm not going to read them all because there's all these bulleted ones of just all these excuses. So remember in the last video when I said I'd love to have a nature center or something, and I just said, oh, that's impossible. Well, that would be an example. Like maybe that's my calling, and maybe I'm stopping myself because I'm just thinking about all the permits and the land I'd have to buy and just probably money more than anything else. And then I'm not a naturalist or anything. So, but this is what all the people were doing. You know, they were just saying like, oh, that's not realistic. I can't make money doing that, or I have too many obligations, or I've trained my whole life for this other thing. I can't switch it now. You know, I've tried so many things and nothing works for me. I think I've been guilty of saying that one. So, yeah, so there's a whole list of like those bliss blockers. It's kind of very similar when we had that video about bliss blockers. So what are you telling yourself about what you may want to do? I think if you sat down with your journal and you really heard the internal words, that you would realize that you do know what you want to do. But we talked about the courage. You probably are just not summoning up enough courage right now to take action, right? So I'll read what Sarah says. After helping these people realize that they really did know what they wanted to do, she knew there was another book to write. So this would be a good book to read too. I Could Do Anything If I Only Knew What It Was. That's again by Barbara Sher. It is by Barbara Sher, but then she also has Barbara Smith. It says with Barbara Smith, so she must have contributed to it. Whether we realize it or not, there's a good reason behind everything we do or don't do, every choice we make or avoid. We can't go forward if we don't know what's holding us back. Knowing the truth does set you free. If you suspect that one of those frustrated, angry, discouraged, or timid voices sounds awfully familiar, you'll find wisdom and reassurance in Barbara's suggestions for discovery. So yeah, maybe think about picking up one of those books. The price we pay for authenticity may seem high, but who among us can truly afford to continue living as a spendthrift of the self? Wow. Sometimes she just gives us that zinger. Yeah, a spendthrift. I can't even say it. A spendthrift of the self, which would mean you're really holding back. You're not sharing yourself with the world. And you're just living like a portion of your potential is another way I would think that would translate. Wow. These definitely make you think. Do you feel like you have a calling that you've been wanting to do for a long time? Do you feel like if you sat down that you would have, I think there's about 10 different reasons here, that you'd have this little voice in your head that would be stopping you from doing it? The first thing is recognizing those things. Yeah. Let me know what you think about this. There's really a lot in these 3 entries. I hope you're doing well. We've got some great entries coming up too for more in September, so stay tuned. And if you haven't subscribed, it's not too late. There's still so many videos you could watch from earlier in the year, and even if you just pick up the journey now through the end of the year, we would love to have you. Please leave me a comment. I love getting them, and I always try to respond. So thanks so much for your support, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye-bye.